Hootsuite, Facebook, DNA Games, those kinds of companies. And I scaled teams, from small technical teams up to large development and R&D teams. So I'm acutely aware of what the problems are, not only in just blockchain recruitment, but in technical recruitment in the industry as a whole.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Great. So she's actually being very, very humble there. Karen's also worked at scaling, for example, Hootsuite. Has anyone used Hootsuite before here? That was a company that had 30 employees, and her company helped them recruit up to 300. So with fast-growing startups, it's really hard to go from 30 to 300. And one of the biggest problems that we're seeing is ICOs, right? So my background, I am the CEO and founder of SuperBLOOM. I've done a couple of these talks today. Tomorrow I'll be talking about ICO as an alternate financing source for startups at the main South by Southwest conference at 9:30 at the Hilton CE. So if you go to the South by Southwest app, you can just Google ICO. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. And my background is really in technology and finance. I have an MBA from Texas, so this is my home turf. And my previous company was in Y Combinator. All my friends are really just founders in the tech industry.
Awesome.
Cool.
So, other way. There we go.
A little bit about our product. We're building a simple way for you to buy, manage, and trade crypto, starting with private pre-sales.
Awesome. And a little bit about Able. So Able is looking to basically redistribute the wealth within inside the recruitment industry. So taking the payouts that go to recruiters and putting those back into the individuals. We also have an AI component of what we do where we're really looking to understand the potential of the individual and hiring the right people for the right jobs at the right time.
Cool, so one of the things that we've been seeing last year, ICOs raised $6.2 billion. And that's a lot of money for financing. In fact, it surpassed VC funding. The main difference is that when startups raise $30 million through traditional VC, that's usually a Series B or even a C round. But most of these startups that have raised 20, 30, 50, $150 million, they're really not much more than a seed project, which means that they don't have a prototype, they don't have a proven business model, they don't have tens of employees or 20s or 30s, they might have 5, and they have a whole marketing team of 10 or 15. They have 5 core members, and now you're giving them $100 million. Or let's just scale that down and say, I'm giving you $10 million. So what do? And we have this problem right now in the industry that we're seeing that all these startups have unlimited resources as far as budget, but what are we gonna do to get the people in place?
So, it's really interesting. We've worked with a number of companies who are experiencing exactly that. They've raised several $1 million, but they're inexperienced founders, so now they're faced with all this money and a commitment to what they said they were going to do, and figuring out that roadmap has been really difficult. And so, blockchain, that gets amplified by the fact that there aren't that many blockchain developers out there, that the talent pool is really, really shallow at this point. And so what we've done, so just so you know, we bootstrapped a lot of our company up front, and we did that by leveraging our recruitment skills. So we initially worked with that you've maybe got an inexperienced team, or that the talent pool is so shallow. So a lot of what we've been doing is working to try to get training. We found that, for example, full stack developers who have really solid theoretical backgrounds, they do really great in learning and scaling up into Solidity and Hyperledger Fabric and those kinds of things really quickly. So, we're trying to answer some of the questions by providing, links to training and those sort of things.
So how did you find your first CTO? Because you guys are building Able on the blockchain, right?
We are, yeah.
So did you find someone that could write in Solidity? Are you using the Ethereum network?
We're using the Ethereum network, yeah.
Great.
So how does Solidity? We actually went to a meetup in Toronto. So we're a Canadian-based company. And our CEO, Eric, went out to ETH Waterloo and met a really great guy, Noah Marconi. And Noah is actually our VP of of R&D, and he's the one who's seen us through a lot of our initial development on the Ethereum network.
Yeah, like how do you, right now we need blockchain engineers, but then there's obviously a shortage of them. What are some ways we think that you can scale it up, especially with Able, a recruiting platform?
So, like I said, we have focused really on growing our talent. So taking some of that more traditional skill set and getting them up to speed quickly using Consensus or BlockGeeks or that kind of thing to get them trained up quickly, and it's worked really well for us. Now we've got a really solid team.
I think that's one of the major issues with companies who want to build blockchain projects. You don't need to find blockchain engineers, you just need to find really great engineers.
Yeah.
Because really great engineers will figure out how to write Solidity or how to write within the blockchain. So my product is based on the Stellar network, which is a top 10 cryptocurrency and public blockchain. And our CTO previously wrote, he built projects at Visa and Google, so enterprise grade products. And so when he picked up Stellar, he just started reading all the documentation, and we chose Stellar over Ethereum network for the ease of bringing on talent. So a lot of times I think picking the right blockchain that people can write to is important as well.
Absolutely, and it has to work for what your product needs to do. But I think, honestly, that theoretical background just goes a long way to providing the foundation that you need in order to grow your talent. And once you get one sort of anchor individual on your team, it's really their job to mentor and grow the rest of the team, and that's been hugely successful for us.
So how did you see, as a recruiter previously for these fast-scaling startups, we've got fast scaling on hyperdrive now. This is on steroids, right? We're talking about 0 to 50 million in 6 months, and 50 million to 250 million just by hodling your treasury to 250 million in a year, right? We heard it earlier, if you guys were here, co-founded one of our partners, they raised 60,000 ETH. At that time, it was about $10 million. They were a small ICO, but at today's prices, 60,000 ETH is Ethereum, is around 40 to 50 million dollars depending on your day, right? So in a year, their treasury 5x'd. And so what do we do, and how do we deploy this capital? What are some ways that we can kind of think about it?
So I'll put on my COO hat for a moment, and I'll say, anytime you're deploying capital, I recommend that you have a gated spend, and you have that vision of what you need to execute against your dollars in the bank. And obviously, if you're hanging on to your treasury and it's growing, that gives you a lot of opportunity down the road. But I think it's like any business that you grow. I think you have to take a measured approach, but in the crypto world, that measured approach also needs to match with the velocity.
Do you see that a lot of, we have it in San Francisco, so I live in San Francisco in the heart of Soma, which is south of Market. It's where all Startup Central is. And for the last 2 years, rent was ridiculous because it was pretty much just subsidized by VC money, right? So VCs were paying companies, giving them lots of money, and they were giving engineers a lot of money, paying them a lot of money, and then those engineers needed apartments, so then the landlords increased the price, and the entire San Francisco increased in value with inflation. Now we've kind of seen those prices come down a little bit as money shifts from startups in Silicon Valley to more ICOs. Do you feel like there's a lot of, I feel like there's some engineers or there's a lot of experts kind of going nuts with charging people. And how do you feel about that?
So it's interesting. I do feel like, as we are growing out our own company and doing our own ICO, you just have to be wary of everybody who does have their hand out. Like I would say, do your diligence on the partners that you choose and the companies that you're going to work with, but also the people who you're bringing into your organization. And you really need to be hiring from a values-based approach. Like, find the people who are your tribe, who belong to what you're doing and are motivated by not only the compensation, but the actual achievement of what you set out to do.
So much easier said than done. All right, let's go to number two. So the number two problem that we have is now that we've identified this, where can we find talent for our team when every for the same skills?
When everyone's vying for the same skills.
Oh yeah, everyone's vying for the same skills. So we apologize for the slide. Yeah, we're all here. There's $6.2 billion of ICO money last year. Everyone's going after the same 1,000 or so blockchain engineers. Same as in San Francisco, where we're all going after the same developers in the city? What happens and how do we attract that?
So maybe this is giving away a little bit of our secret sauce for Able, but we actually decided to, rather than Toronto, which is a center for development, or Vancouver, we actually went to a small city in British Columbia, and it's actually been really quite easy in that sense for us to attract the talent because we're outside of those main areas where it is so expensive. So housing, livability, those kinds of things really come into play. And so if you are looking to attract talent, you don't necessarily need to be in a big center, or you don't need to be recruiting from a big center, because sometimes it's the opposite as well. You know, there could be somebody in Kansas or Iowa who has great skills, and they're just vying for that option to come out to a San Francisco or in New York. So looking beyond the borders of where you are and really reaching out for people who, again, are your tribe, who are interested in what you're doing for more than just the compensation.
So I think with ICOs it's very interesting. A lot of people have distributed teams with moving, because crypto is so global.
Yeah.
We have distributed teams for marketing and for promotions and for operations, and now we're seeing distributed engineering teams. How do you feel like a culture of a company can maintain itself or develop if everyone's spread out in 10 different locations in 5 different time zones?
But I think that is your culture, right? So that becomes part of the culture, and you find the tools and the ways to compensate and work around that. I mean, blockchain is global. We've worked with clients, you know, in South Africa and Singapore, and what we found is some of our team is distributed, and that just helps us to address that global issues.
What's the coolest thing or the weirdest thing that you've figured out by recruiting for blockchain that differs from recruiting for startups and big tech companies?
You know, I think the thing I've, as a Gen Xer, I will say I've come to understand and appreciate the skill sets that the millennials bring, much more so than maybe I did before. I just think that being a digital native, there is just this assumption of how the blockchain works and this adoption of it. And for me, it was a little bit of an eye-opener that we are on this exponential curve, and the talent and the next generation that's coming in is already adapted to that. So they're already sort of hitting the ground at that rate. And you know, I've come to learn and value what they bring to the table much more so than I think I had before.
Let's talk about misaligned incentives, which is one of the problems that we have up on the deck. I, as a CEO in this world, am facing a lot of new vendors just seeing money, right? They see is dollar signs. All they read about is ICOs, crypto, rich, rich, rich. You have tons of money. This is sort of like why Y Combinator recommended against you having an article for funding announcements, right? When companies raise Series A, they're like, oh, I just raised $10 million. What happens is everyone comes out and asks for a handout.
Now, the recruiters knock on your door.
Yeah, the recruiters knock on your door, the consultants come out, fake lawsuits, patent trolls, all sorts of things come out.
Right.
With ICOs, this is now more public than ever. I mean, what kind of incentives are we seeing across, like, what are the most weird incentives you've seen?
We definitely, well, I don't know if they're weird, but we definitely see, you know, the requirements. If they're not a distributed team, they definitely have requirements for moving. Everybody wants tokens in your ICO. I don't know. There's just, I can't think of one like specifically weird thing that we've seen, but the demand is just there for more money, more benefits, more vacation, those kinds of things.
So more.
More.
Is this a millennial thing, or do you think it's an industry thing?
Do you know what? It's actually interesting. One of our employees, you know, when I was interviewing him, he said to me, look, I want to travel. I don't want to sit behind a desk, but I'm really good at my job, and I want to be able to do that from wherever I am. Are you okay with that? And you know, I would have said 5 years ago that would have been a really weird request. Like, I want to travel and just work from wherever. But I would say now that's actually a more common thing. So that flexibility and allowing people to work to their, you know, first of all, to their comfort zone and their skill sets. I think there's a lot of expectation around that, and that could be generational. But it's also, I also think that's sort of on the advent of blockchain as well.
So now that we've identified the 2 problems that we think that most startups are facing, let's talk about some solutions. So we talked a little bit about this throughout, but how does Able see them helping generate some of these solutions for all the companies out there?
Well, if I talk about Able as a company versus Able as a product, our CEO, Eric Simmons, he's been on our road trip for our raise, and one of the things that's come out of that is this global alliance of companies that are working in the HR side of blockchain. And so I think building those alliances within your industry sector or subsector is really important. You know what we're doing is changing the world, and that's the whole thing of blockchain. Is it's more collaborative, it's more open, it's more transparent. So instead of a lot of competitors on the plate, we've now built a global alliance where we're all working together to figure out the same problem. So that's one. I think that one of the things that Able, the product, does is it identifies potential, and so the product really focuses on the right person in the right job at the right time. And I think you can't, that gets rid of biases. It doesn't see the color of your skin. It doesn't know what your gender is. It just understands what your potential is in the role that's being presented. And so I think one of the evolutions of hiring is really focusing in on potential and somebody's adaptability. Those are going to be big things to focus on.
And I think crypto is very interesting because today, we're talking about, we have all women in blockchain. And I think what crypto is really about is about inclusion, diversity, and access. And how does that play in with recruiting with these principles? Like, how do we look at the way that we...
It's interesting if we looked at that first slide sort of had the ring of all these, let's see if we can go back here. So it's all the touch points in the recruitment process. Everything from a hiring manager to an Indeed or a Monster or LinkedIn or those kinds of things. I think once we can start to eliminate some of that and bring a more streamlined process, I think that's where we're really going to start to see the magic happen. Like right now, if you look at all these touch points, that's a really convoluted workflow, and the whole thing behind Able is that we get to consolidate all that down into somebody's profile, and it's already there present. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to root through all of that stuff again.
Cool. So tomorrow you guys are pitching at 2:15, right?
Sometime in there, yeah.
Yeah, so between 2:15 and 3:30, please come and watch Able talk about their product. We will also be live streaming that tomorrow and creating the voting platform so that you can go online and vote. And 3 of the people who vote will randomly receive new banknotes that have BTC in them. So this is sort of a new technology that we're debuting tomorrow on a platform that we're debuting, and we hope that you guys can join us tomorrow. We have one more panel this afternoon, and it was great to talk to you.
Great, thank you so much.
Cool.
Appreciate you.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a day.
Thank you so much. The next panel is going to be blockchain.